This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, and welcome to this episode of Teachers Talk Radio, the Late Late Show on a Monday. We are talking about LGBT plus educators' experiences in faith schools, including as students. So, trying to answer the question, can I really be queer here? For those of us in faith schools, it is a complicated question.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Okay, good evening again. So I am a firm believer that you should never apologize for the food or say it tastes like soap. But we've had a number of technical issues today. so I'm really got all my fingers and toes crossed that this is going to run smoothly and we don't have to cut this short, because it is a topic that is very, very personal to me. It is so personal to so many educators around the country, around the world. And it's important, an important topic, not just for those of us that it directly relates to, but for everybody. So we're talking about the experiences that LGBT plus educators have in faith schools specifically, but a lot of what we're going to discuss is relevant to LGBT plus educators' experiences in schools, because some of the issues and some of the experiences we're going to talk about are unfortunately or fortunately, depending, kind of universal, and they apply to lots of different people in lots of different educational contexts. So before I carry on anymore, Tasha, our lovely guest for this evening, are you with us?
I am here.
Oh, glorious. Okay, so that was my first issue ticked off. All right, so we're good. So Tasha is a wonderful human being that I met in February of this year at a union conference, and we had I have shamelessly ripped off the title of the show from the seminar at that conference.
It was my title.
And it was yours. I'm so glad that it wasn't Graham's. It was yours. It was yours. Good. Okay, I feel better about it now. So just to introduce our guest today, Natasha Brandon is a secondary school teacher focused on collaboration, empowerment, and inclusivity. As a proudly queer, neurodivergent Jewish woman, she has a unique and intersectional approach to teaching that allows students to harness their full potential and thrive in education. Natasha has extensive experience working with children, both as a teacher and a youth worker within the Jewish community. And with a background as a costume designer for theater, she now teaches creative art and design at key stages 3, 4, and 5. So lots of experience in the room, so to speak. And really looking forward to you sharing some of what you shared with us at the conference in February with a wider audience, because I think it's very important. So,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm very glad you're here. So is there anything you want to say, or anything that I didn't say that you want to add to your little intro?
I think it's really important to stipulate first that we're going to be talking about our personal experiences.
Yeah.
And that everyone's experiences of both being of faith or being around faith and queer can be drastically different. And we don't want to pour any positive or negative connotations onto anything. This is just our experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And we welcome other experiences. Oh, my cats came out of the bedroom. It's happening the second week in a row. So I'm so sorry for any background noise. Where was I? I got lost. I got distracted with scratching posts. Yes, our experiences are very personal, obviously, and we welcome other listeners' experiences that are personal to them. If they have anything you want to share, feel free to call or text in if you want to join the conversation or respond to anything we've said or contribute anything. And on that kind of note, I think the language that we're going to use, I only say this because I hadn't realized as a queer person, as a queer teacher, that's the word I use to define myself. That's the word I use probably more than anything else, because it's an umbrella for me and it works for me and it sits well with me. But I hadn't realized until I was speaking to some non-LGBT adults, older adults, many years ago, that word was just like, they were under the impression that was quite a negative thing for them, or they were under the assumption it was still a negative word. So I think we just want to clarify that any terminology that Natasha uses, or I use, or anyone else, who calls her messages in, are the identities or the terminology that they use to identify themselves, and are comfortable with that. So caveat emptor. Right. So we discussed at the conference.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about your background, your personal background, in, generally, and in faith schools as a student and as a teacher. And then we all kind of got into little groups and we talked about our own experiences, and it was all very warm and welcoming and affirmative and wonderful. But I'm going to ask you to kind of repeat what you said then, or give the listeners a bit of background on yourself, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So I grew up and still live in Northwest London, which, for those who aren't aware, is pretty much the epicenter of the Jewish community in the UK. So I grew up around people who not only were Jewish, but also knew a lot of Jews. So faith was a normal part of conversation. I went to a faith nursery school, a faith primary school, and was removed and went to mainstream for 3 years, and then went back into a faith-based secondary school.
Okay.
And throughout that time, I was a youth worker as well. From about age 14, I joined a number of different Jewish youth movements, and I led summer camps, winter camps, and I taught Sunday school up until last year. So when I left theatre, I picked up a TA job and I started working in an Orthodox Jewish secondary school as a teaching assistant. And when I took my PGCE, I did a placement in a Catholic school, and then my NQT year and my NQT +1, I spent in a Catholic school, different one. So I've been moving from sort of faith school to faith school to faith school, faith environment. At the same time, been slowly learning a lot more about myself as a queer woman in that time, and how my faith interacts with my queer identity, which, because I am part of the Reformed Jewish movement, which is a progressive religious movement, my faith has never really had a negative interaction with my sexuality. However, I grew up going to an Orthodox Jewish school, and my faith was very much against the idea of me coming out.
Right.
So it was very contradictory growing up. And when I went into my first school placement, I very much felt like I had to stay in the closet. I didn't dress what I would perceive to be queer baiting clothing. Like, I didn't wear rainbows. I wasn't too bright. I didn't push the boat out.
Which can I just interrupt, because most listeners will have no idea. Whenever I've seen you, you're in very bright clothing, sometimes with rainbows.
Yes, I do like to be to wear bright clothes, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I spent a lot of my teenage years wearing black.
Right, yeah, I think a lot of us fit into that category, actually.
And I think towards the end of the time where I was working as a teaching assistant, I already knew I was going to go move on to do my PGCE. I had a student with profound SEMH needs who had come out to me, and she had a lot of safeguarding needs. So I had to document absolutely everything she said to me and all the conversations that we had together. And one of those conversations, she turned around to me and was like, Miss Brandon, I know that you've said that you're queer, but does that mean that you like to kiss girls? And I just thought it was just a really cute, sweet question because she needed to know that it was normal. So I responded in the most diplomatic way I possibly could. And I said, I have been in relationships with girls and I have been in relationships with boys. I just am in relationships with people that make me happy. Why do you ask? And she said, it's because I'd quite like to kiss girls. And I said, as long as you don't do that on school grounds, because we know that we can't make close physical contact with anyone. That's not a problem, as long as they are happy to kiss you back. And that was the end of the conversation. She moved on to something else.
Yeah, as they usually do. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I got called into SLT and told that my conversation was inappropriate for sharing too much personal information. And I kind of looked at them for a second and I said, I specifically did not disclose any personal information. So what are we calling disclosing? Is it the fact that I kiss girls? Because I do.
I would have paid to see that conversation, by the way.
Well, it certainly made everyone in the room feel uncomfortable. And you knew that they couldn't, they had reached the line.
Yeah.
And they weren't going to cross it. But they just reiterated to me the importance of Jewish values. And to which I just nodded and went, your Jewish values.
Yeah. And that's so important because you've gone to Orthodox schools, you worked in an Orthodox school, and that's not your daily reality. So I think like we were talking about at conference, we were talking some people about how they're Christian, but they work in a Catholic school. And you would think that, generally overall things would line up, but not necessarily, So it's even if you're working in a school that is in like on paper or supposedly of your faith, that is not necessarily the case in your day-to-day experiences in day-to-day life. Case in point, yours. Yeah. So I think I've got so many questions and I've got so many things. There's so many things I want to share about that, but I just really, I don't want to let go of that student that asked you that bizarre question out of the blue. Sometimes when you have bad days and then kids just make you laugh, it's like, oh, this is why I'm here. It's those offhand comments that get you, isn't it? It's the things that come out of the blue that you're not prepared for. And I find myself having to stop and really think. Even we're kind of in teacher mode when we do that anyway, right? Like a kid asks us a question and we think like, okay, what's the best way for me to answer this or address this question that will help them learn something or that will, help them grow in this way. Like we naturally do that anyway. But when it's something so personal and it takes you so off guard, I'm full of admiration that you managed to respond the way that you did, because I don't even know what I would have said.
Well, actually, that being said, when I was a youth worker, when I was 20 actually, I was running sessions for our new leaders, the 16 going on 17-year-olds, and I ran a session called Awkward Phrases and Awkward Situations.
Wonderful.
And it was all about essentially safeguarding our teenagers. If they are approached or witness or see or are participating in sexually inappropriate situations with minors. Because camp is camp, kids are going to do what they do, but we have to react appropriately and not overstep boundaries and not put ourselves in situations that could potentially put us as educators or youth workers in danger. And I said, look, there is a very real situation that you might walk in on two 14-year-olds having sex, and what do you do in the meantime?
Yeah.
And a lot of that was, how do we answer questions when children answer us questions, do without making them feel bad that they asked them in the first place?
Yeah, yeah, and I find that that's such a, even apart from this particular topic, I teach PSHE, which is on. I love teaching PSHE. Like, give me all of the awkward PSHE lessons. It is the highlight of my existence. But I've got this one manic year 7 class, and we had to do a puberty unit recently, and
Excellent, I love that.
oh, I love it so much because they're so uncomfortable at the beginning. And it's like, as soon as they realize, no, this is actually a safe space and Miss is actually taking the question seriously, but she's also not putting up with any foolishness from anyone else. Like, I can genuinely ask anything here, and maybe I'm not going to get the exact answer I was looking for, but she's going to take it seriously. Like, you can see the cogs turning, and you can see the moments they realize that, and they very, very quickly, like, once they realize that you're responding appropriately and not making them feel ashamed or stupid or embarrassed for wondering those things or asking those questions, like, it becomes a really, really important space for those kids to learn really important things that they're not learning anywhere else because they ain't learning it at home.
Oh,
So
absolutely not.
it's so important to make them comfortable enough to ask.
Yeah, and I think supporting that environment is another reason why I thought about this session again
Mm-hmm.
is this is actually a really nice segue. When I was doing my NQT year,
Mm-hmm.
and it was midst of lockdown because
Mm-hmm.
I started my PGCE in 2019. Excellent.
Smart. How
So
smart of you. Good
I
job.
know, lovely. So during lockdown provisions, in the second lockdown we had in the like January
Mm-hmm.
period,
Yeah.
students at that point had found out, not all of them, some of them had found out that I was openly queer. And at this point, I have a rainbow tattoo on my wrist, and I am starting to wear bright colours because why not?
Yeah.
And a student came out to me as trans, um, really off the cuff, just said they would like me to use different pronouns, and I just nodded my head and said yes, not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And when I continued to refer to them with the pronouns that they had asked me, they felt comfortable enough to disclose uh, issues that had been going on at home. And I think that knowing
Yep.
who the queer staff are at school, and even if
Yep.
there is only one person you can turn to, I bet
Mm-hmm.
you any money they are the only the only teacher that some of these children feel comfortable enough discussing issues with.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
And it can feel very overwhelming being the only person that a child will feel comfortable enough to turn to. And
Mm-hmm.
also, it feels, um, you feel a sense of, again, a safeguarding duty to take care of
Mm-hmm.
these kids. And there's often not a lot you can do or say in certain situations because
Yeah.
of the nature of certain faith schools.
Yep. Absolutely. And I mean, that's so important that students have a safe person. And the more diverse the teaching staff in every way, the
Mm-hmm.
more, like, in every possible way, the more diverse the teaching staff is, the more likely it is that every student's going to find somebody that they can relate to, that they see themselves in, that they view as a role model, that they feel safe with, that they feel gets it. And if you end up with an educational institution that only has people who are from one particular place or of one particular faith, or or perceived in one particular way, then that you're just shutting out so many kids. And I would love to say it's not that way and that everyone can feel safe with everyone else, but I mean, we all remember being 13. So it is so important. And then for schools to, regardless of faith status, to actively encourage that in the staff is super important, because otherwise you end up in situations like you just said, where you have queer teachers who are trying to support queer students and are either openly and directly being I almost said stonewalled, which is ironic. Who are openly and directly being blocked from helping these kids because they're not allowed to discuss X, Y, or Z, or it's more of a kind of subversive, sinister, unspoken thing that you're just not supposed to say these things, or you have staff that are too afraid to be their authentic selves and are thus depriving these children of the role models that they so badly need. And I've said this so many times on the show. One of the main reasons I got into teaching in the first place is because I had so many teachers who, like, of all different backgrounds for all different reasons, were so important to me when I was that age. And I wanted to be for other people what those teachers were and continue to be for me. And if you're blacking out certain parts of a person's like core identity, or openly, or if you're subtly telling students that it's not okay and they can't talk about it and staff can't talk about it, then you're causing them so much more damage, than you are doing good. Which I feel like to us is so glaringly obvious.
But silence is the biggest issue, and I think growing up it was deafening. So we used to have sex education once a year, and it was one session run by one Jewish charity, and charity themselves aren't homophobic in any way. And I found this out because when I was growing up, every year I would put in, you'd have the box where you could put questions in.
Yeah.
Every year I would put in something about liking a girl, fancying a girl, kissing a girl, genuinely never sexual, because I didn't need those questions answered at that point.
Yeah.
But I wanted someone to answer my question because I knew I liked girls, but I did not know how to find out if other girls like girls, and how I would then approach a girl. To be honest, I still don't.
So yeah, I was going to say, so dating advice. You were looking for dating advice, is what you're saying.
I was. Yeah. And every year they would open up the question, look at it, and then put it aside. And I found out from a friend who later worked for the charity, who taught sex ed at the school before the RSE law, before the RSE changes. And he told me that any question relating to unprotected sex, or related to any kind of relationship that would not be traditional marriage aspects, had to be set aside.
Wow. That doesn't surprise me at all, but wow. Yeah.
And sorry,
go on. No, go on.
So I think growing up, I knew that it was okay to be gay and Jewish because my rabbi growing up is openly gay and married to a man, and has never made me feel like my religion would have any other opinion. And my parents were also supportive, although hilariously, my mum's still convinced that I'm actually a lesbian and I'm not pansexual because I'm just so much happier with a woman. I was like, it doesn't really work that way, but
yeah,
she's supportive.
But yeah, she's supportive. she's trying.
My whole family have been wonderfully supportive, and I think if I didn't have that, I think my teenage years and that sort of questioning aspect of being queer would have been so much harder, because I did not have anyone at school I could turn to. Yeah, I did not have a safe person.
They don't have that at home. Like we at my school, my previous schools, every school I've worked at, everywhere, they've got a really diverse student body whose parents have all sorts of beliefs and come from all sorts of places and have all sorts of worldviews. And a lot of those kids absolutely 100% do not have support at home. And is it not our job to to help these children feel safe? You cannot learn if you don't feel safe. We talk about safeguarding, we talk about Maslow, we talk about all these things to help these students on a really base level. And if you are not providing a safe space for students in all of these different ways, then we're failing them. And you have kids that are not as privileged and as lucky and to have a wonderful family like you do that are supportive. So they come from a household where they can't be themselves. They go to school, they can't be themselves. It's like, what are we doing here? Anyway, we need to take a brief break, and we'll come back and talk about all the other horrible and wonderful stories. And we've got some texts coming in as well from some listeners, so we'll share those as well. So please feel free to call in or text in if you have anything to contribute.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC News website features a long read on the topic of school buildings and fears that some schools will miss out on a rebuild. The last places on a scheme to rebuild schools in England are reported to have gone to schools with issues caused by reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, or RAC. This has left some school leaders frustrated and unions accusing the government of cutting corners by using existing schemes to deal with a new problem. The government says it has invested £15 billion in school buildings since 2015, and the School Rebuildings Programme, known as SRP, aims to rebuild or refurbish 500 schools in a decade. The first 99 were selected by the DfE in 2021, having been identified as in the worst condition. Local authorities and school trusts were then invited to nominate schools in 2022. Around 300 schools were successful. 797 schools were rejected but hoped to be chosen in subsequent selection rounds. However, for many, they were disappointed not to be named in the final list of 110 schools. In recent months, it has emerged that 106 out of the 110 have been affected by RAC. Head teachers leading in crumbling, ageing buildings are disappointed. They are coping with leaking roofs, temporary buildings and plumbing issues. The article reports on 3 schools from across England who have all missed out. In Northern Ireland, unions representing further education lecturers have voted to reject what they describe as an insulting pay offer. Members of the UCU and the NASUWT have been offered a 5% increase plus an unconsolidated payment of £1,500. Both unions have called on the Economy Minister to engage with them to close an education pay gap. Earlier this month, there was a formal offer on school teachers' pay, but union leaders say that in FE, staff have watched the pay gap widen for far too long. The NASUWT's General Secretary, Dr Patrick Roach, said FE lecturers in Northern Ireland are fed up with being treated as second-class teachers. FE Week also reports on the sector with an article focusing on the government's plan for a new Advanced British Standard qualification. College membership bodies and school leaders' unions have released responses to the government consultation on the proposal, which closed last week. The plan was announced by Rishi Sunak last year, that the ABS would replace T-levels and A-levels in around 10 years' time, although an upcoming election may change all this. Both the NAHT and ASCL have released their responses, focusing on concerns that the new proposals are clunky and that they undermine the parity of esteem between academic and technical education, and that without investment in recruitment are also unworkable. Under the plan, students would study a set of subject majors and minors, with all required to study English and maths to the age of 18. Unions also warned against considering reform in isolation, and that it should be considered as part of a whole, from EYFS to Key Stage 5. Full details can be found on the FE Week website, whilst a similar article in the TES focuses on comments by Exam Board OCR due to concerns of teacher recruitment and school space needed to deliver ABS. OCR says that there are opportunities for change, but that it disagrees with government proposals. It also expressed the view that the A-level name should be kept due to its strong and growing international reputation. For further analysis, you can read more on the TES magazine website. Finally, student loans are in the news again after an FOI request from the BBC revealed the highest outstanding student debt is more than £230,000. The figures also reveal that another loan holder has accumulated nearly £55,000 worth of interest. The student loans company says graduates in England leave university with an average debt of just under £45,000. The FOI request was for details of the highest amount of student debt owed for each of the 5 student loan plans on offer. The amount graduates repay and the length of the loan vary from plan to plan and depend on when and where they went to university and their degree type. The figures have sparked debate again amongst many students, graduates and others. It's almost 15 years since tuition fees were tripled in England. Fees now cost a maximum of £9,250 in England. Debts are written off at the end of loan terms, but this is usually after 30 years. The student loans company processes around 1.5 million loan applications per year. A spokesperson for the website Save the Student described the high figures for outstanding debt as eye-watering, and the NUS said the system discourages people from working class backgrounds from going to university. The Department for Education said its reforms mean no graduate will pay back more than they borrowed when inflation is taken into account. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
So interesting and slightly depressing news bites there. I thought before getting into some of the comments we've had from listeners and some other points that were raised, I thought I should probably give a bit of background about my experiences because I haven't actually talked about them at all.
Yes, please.
My family's all a bit of everything, but I would not define myself as a person of faith, and consequently never thought I would end up in a faith school. It was kind of a rule I had when I came over here from Canada and the Bahamas many years ago. I thought, well, I'm not working in one of those Church of England things they have going on. I just never thought I would. And then I kind of changed my mind when I was starting to apply to schools and I was looking at different schools. So I was like, I almost applied for a school that you're familiar with that I won't name, that has some pretty negative experiences for queer people in general. I never did it though. And I kind of, because I ended up at the same school, the school in London for 9 years and then another 2 afterwards. And I worked at a different school. None of them were faith schools. And then we moved city. Like I never went to a faith school. Well, technically my high school was it technically Presbyterian? But that was in name only, like the history of it. No one cared. It wasn't a thing. And
because it would have to be private. Or
no. So my high school was in the Bahamas, so it was private. It was private, but the church involvement was pretty much non-existent when I was there. Like there was a prayer, like they would occasionally have prayers in certain assemblies, but even that wasn't all the time. Like it was very much like, this is our history. We used to be attached to this church, but now, which is why we have the name that we do, but like no one really cares anymore. It was that kind of thing. And then I ended up moving cities, moving up to Midlands, and I liked the look of this one Church of England school. And I thought, you know what? Life changes. Let me go for it. Let me just go for it. And if they ask me for an interview, I'll see. And if I don't like the impression of it, I'll leave. But I went and I really liked it. And I saw on, I'd seen on their website and I'd confirmed it when I was there for the interview that they had an LGBT plus student group. And so I was like, okay, well, this can't be, if they have a student group, then like surely I'm not going to have to, do you know what I mean? I'm not going to have to like dress in black and hide in the closet and lie constantly. So I was like, all right. But I didn't get any other like negative or questionable vibes from it. And so I've been there since September. And when I say it's never been a problem, I mean, it has never been a problem. I've had so many more negative experiences as a student watching other students, experiencing things myself, negative experiences as a queer teacher in other schools, watching queer students in other schools have negative experiences. I've had countless of those in non-faith schools, and I have the only thing in this school that I think falls in that category is the fact that some students use homophobic language as a slur because
yeah, well, that's a big issue in
teenagers
the
and they're
UK.
ignorant, and it's big, and it's a problem everywhere. It's not limited. It's not limited to that school. It's not limited to faith schools. It's just a problem that we have in our society. So it's pleasantly surprised me in every possible way, because my head teacher is so lovely and wonderful, and it's this school and the staff and the leadership is just kind of everything that I wasn't expecting it to be in the best possible way. So when people say, you know, oh, you're working at a church school, oh, you're doing this, oh, you're doing that, I'm like, yeah, I know, I said I wouldn't, but I promise you it's not what I thought, and it's probably not what you think either. So I think every I know this is kind of a general faith school topic, but I think we have to remember that just like every school is different, every faith school is different as well. And it's not, I think if you're a queer teacher, you're just as likely to come across various phobias or just really toxic atmospheres in a non-faith school as you are in a faith school. It actually doesn't necessarily track that one is going to be automatically a more negative experience than the other. So I feel like
I do find though
go on.
that with specific bigoted opinions will often have hidden prejudices elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I did find that being out both as Jewish and as a queer woman could put me in difficult situations just
Yeah.
because people hold their own opinions, and
Mm-hmm.
they will put those bigoted opinions on you. And I had a lot of issues in the Catholic school, not with children per se, because their comments wash over me. It's much
Yeah.
of a muchness,
Yeah.
but it's when they reiterate things that their parents say.
Yeah.
And you know that it doesn't come from them because they're not young enough to have opinions that
Yeah.
formulated yet.
Yep.
Especially when I had year 8 tell me that I was going to that I would burn in hell whether I liked it or not. And I
Question
couldn't
though.
quite tell you whether that was because I was Jewish or because I was gay or both.
Oh, and who would like that is what I take from that statement. Who would like that exactly? Yeah, no, you are right, and I guess, but then again, like I've had, so as another example, and again generalizing, but this is specific to my experience in the school that I was at for years and years and years in London that I absolutely loved, and still do. It's got a huge Muslim population, and I adore those kids and I love them so much. But the amount of problems that have come from their parents, and exactly what you said, like kids parroting things that their parents have said, or parents complaining about X, Y, and Z that's none of their damn business because they don't like the fact that staff are diverse, or we have a curriculum that we follow outside of their house, or, you know, things like this, like really like intensely religious parents causing problems within the school. But that was all in this non-faith school. So again, to me, it really comes down to, you know, who are the kids and who are their families, and like who is your actual intake, and then how is how is SLT, like, how is management backing you when stuff happens? Because even in the most wonderful of circumstances, you're gonna get silly people saying silly things. So like, go on.
Well, we've just had a comment come through,
Mm-hmm.
and it says, "My current Catholic primary is the only one I've taught in. Although it's a lovely school, the awkwardness that flows through the policies and procedures dropped down from the diocese is simultaneously sad and hilarious. It is very much like we will ignore LGBT plus POV and hopefully it won't be a problem." And this
But
is actually
I've had
something
that.
that
I've had that in a non-faith school, like the most toxic work environment I've ever been in. The most like the loud silence that you talked about
yeah.
towards queer people was in a non-faith school. Like, it's just
Do you know what's
anyway, I
really
don't want
interesting? At the Catholic school that I worked at, when the new RSE unit came in order to write the new curriculum, they asked form tutors to write one lesson a term, and then they would all get combined together so that we would have a new unit. Now, I don't know why, but I'm going to make the assumption that someone knew. But I got the gender, sex, and sexuality topic for year nine, which I think is a really lovely opportunity to talk about the wonderfully diverse rainbow of people under the flag. So I fully went through a basis of a twinkle lesson, so I knew that someone had safeguarded this lesson.
yeah.
And then sort of adapted it to make it more of an interactive activity. But it was I also included the genderbread person who I like.
Yeah.
But
Classic.
when I got feedback on this lesson, I was asked by the head of PSHE to remove the intersex flag because it would confuse children. And because and I think if I remember correctly, the wording was something like we just don't need to have the intersex genderqueer issues. It's too confusing. And I replied like, intersex people exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we might have, because they make up what, just less than 1% of the population, we might have intersex students who go to the school. And there's nothing you can do to change that.
Yep. Yep. And that horrible toxic place I mentioned previously also had, like, I got an email or something, like I was sent information about a student that they didn't use the word intersex, but that's what it was. And I remember reading this because there were other like related health things that like certain staff had to be aware of. And I remember reading this and thinking like, oh, this kid, like this is an intersex child, and they probably don't even know that is what they are. Like, because I just knowing their parents, they wouldn't have phrased it that way. They would have probably avoided it. The school certainly wasn't using this, but we literally had, like, I had tangible evidence that there were these students in the school, and yet it was still very much like, no, we don't discuss this. We don't talk about it. So Paul's comment here about, let's just ignore the LGBT plus point of view and it won't be a problem is just so common.
And Graham saying that heads in Catholic schools might be supportive, but have to look over their shoulder at the bishop or the diocese. I mean, I remember when I got sent through the outlier for about the commentary made by the diocese about the new RSE unit. It was I think there was a line about the focus on the home and the family and or traditional family values. And in my brain, I'm thinking that's the same thing as just saying gay people exist, just not here.
Yeah, not here. No, they magically aren't present here. Not in this institution. Absolutely not.
No, they're outside. They exist. They're outside.
Outside us. So I looked at I remembered when I was like today, I just had this flash of a memory. I remember reading through my school's policies and procedures and handbooks and stuff, as you do when you're a new member of staff, because it's useful, but also because you have to. And I did this in September, and I remember seeing something that made me go, the hell? And then I forgot about it and put it out of my head because I'd been asked to run the school's LGBT plus student group that I had seen advertised previously, which to be fair, I think was because no one else had yet signed up. It was one of the clubs that needed somebody to sign up for it. And the teacher across the corridor from me used to run it, but couldn't because there was a scheduling conflict. So like logically, it made sense for them to ask me, but also it made sense for them to ask me, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So I kind of forgot about this thing that I read in one of the policies because I felt really comfortable like being given ownership of that group and being trusted to do it and the school supporting and all this stuff that I hadn't always had at previous schools. But it came back to my memory today. So there's this one line. I won't read the whole thing, but it basically says, you should not discuss your own sexual orientation with pupils. And I was like, oh, that's cute. Because what is discussing my sexual orientation with pupils?
So does that mean that if a teacher is pregnant and has a very obvious pregnant belly, that they cannot discuss their pregnant belly?
Yeah, because that would be discussing their
sexual orientation.
Yeah. Or, the classic example of a female teacher mentioning her husband and kids and they went to the park on the weekend, or having a photo of her entire family, her entire heterosexual family on her desk. If they can do that, then it's just completely absurd.
Just existing with anything that's an identifier of your sexuality.
Yeah. But and the kid, it's not like the kids can. I have a photo of my 15-year-old sister on my desk because on a bad day when 15-year-olds are being horrible, I look at her and think like, they're not all bad, right? They're not all bad. She's the light of my life. So I've got a photo of my sister, but my sister at 15 looks about 25. So I constantly have kids being like, who's that on your desk? And they're either like, is that your daughter? Is that your wife? Who is it? I'm like, oh my God, guys, it's my sister. Calm down. But they ask these things, and it's like, what am I supposed to, and then so often I think, what would happen if I did have a photo of my wife on there? What would I literally wouldn't, because I'm not the kind of person that would have personal family photos, except for this one exception. Like I work with kids and my sister is a kid and I need a reminder sometimes, which is why she's there. But I wouldn't have a picture of my wife on my desk. But hypothetically, if I wanted to, would I not be able to do that because of that line in the policy? But then if that's true of queer teachers, then surely that's true of everyone. And as you said, what would the pregnant
Well, they didn't stipulate that it was that you couldn't talk about your homosexual relationship. You just couldn't talk about your sexuality.
Your orientation. It's an exercise in absurdity, isn't it? But they clearly, and that would have come, I'm assuming, from higher up. That would have been a comment that probably filtered down from maybe the diocese. I don't actually.
There was an interesting argument when because some stuff like this has been going through the US education system. And obviously everything's voted on by parents, which is madness, honestly madness. Yeah. But people have turned around and been like, if teachers cannot discuss sexuality, just any sexuality, just sexuality in general, then they can't learn about Martha Washington. And the entire crowd just sort of like looked around and goes, because the only reason that she's famous is because of her marriage.
Yeah.
Which is her sexuality.
It's an absolute joke. So another brief break and then we can get back to laughing.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
So that also reminded me, this discussion of like kids saying stuff and asking things and whatever. I meant to say this earlier when we were talking about the random questions that they ask and how it totally throws me off. So this really made me laugh. This was a few months ago now, and I hadn't actually, like, I think one or two of my classes, like, kids had asked me really subtly, like, during the LGBT plus club or afterwards, like, Miss, are you a member of the community? You know, they were trying to be all something like that. And to which I'd always be like, yes. Why do you sound like it's a secret? But one time, I can't remember what class it was now, but I was, you know, those lessons where there's 30 kids in the room and it's manic and you're spinning 15 plates at a time and you're trying to do this and someone's going, Miss, 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 and it's just absolute carnage. It was one of those moments, and I was like mid leap from one kid to another. And a kid in the middle, totally out of the blue, because kids are mental, goes, Miss, do you have a husband? And it was instantaneous. I didn't think about it because I couldn't. There was no space left in my brain. I instinctually went, husband? Ew.
Yes, perfect reaction.
And I like immediately stopped and went, oh no. What have I done? What have I done? But they didn't even blink, and then we're just like, but you got ring on your finger. And I was like, yeah, figure it out. And they're like, oh, you have a wife. And I was like, good job. Okay, page 3. they're really deeply unbothered, the kids that ask. It really does not have to be some massive, enormous deal, which is what, like, I don't understand why you put something in a policy in document that says something as absolutely foolish as a teacher cannot discuss.
Also, it just doesn't make any sense to be that vague.
No.
Like, if you're going to be a bigot, at least tell people you're going to be a bigot.
But that's obviously why it's there, because the type of person that would write this thing up obviously knows exactly what they want to say, but has the intelligence to know that they can't say it on paper. So,
well, that being said, and I think Graham will probably still be in the chat, but there are definitely people who have been asked to sign forms to distinctly say that they will not discuss their lifestyle choices.
Oh, lifestyle choices now. That's the euphemism we're going with. Right. Okay. So I guess I'm trying to think, like, because we said at the beginning that so much of this topic is so important for queer teachers. They need to know what they're getting into. They need to know that, every school is different and so on and so on. But also non-LGBT staff need to be aware of all the issues that queer teachers might come up against. And I think another thing to raise, if it hasn't been made clear enough, is that if you are moving schools or looking for your first job as a queer educator, oh my goodness, please do your research, because I failed to do that one time and got burned. I've seen it happen so many times, and all of these stories and these anecdotes are just proving you really need to know what you are going into, what the environment is like, how supportive staff are, what your expectations are, what you're going to have to sign or what you're going to have to do, and how you are comfortable being in a public, in a not like public, but like in that sphere, how you are comfortable presenting and what you're comfortable saying or not saying, and what you're comfortable being held accountable to. So Graham has just said, Graham's just said,
going to say,
I was told not to talk about being married.
Yeah. And you know what inspired my statement that I named the session?
Yeah.
Is that I had a colleague in my previous school. He was also an NQT like I was, and he said that in his job interview, he literally asked, "Is it okay to be queer here? Because I'm about to get married to a man, and I'd like to be able to talk about it."
Yep. And
as you should ignore it, Graham, because you should talk about your marriage.
Yes. And I feel like everyone it's just a thing that some people do when they're adults, and it's love and it's family, and
And we should
everyone
normalize it.
it's
Normalize the
normal for
conversation.
anyone, and it should be something that's normalized and accepted. And it just boggles my mind. Graham actually said something earlier that I skirted right over because we got distracted by Catholic primary schools. So Graham also says, I've been selling pronoun badges, ally badges, and rainbow ribbons to my colleagues. And that visibility to students has been so valuable and important to our LGBT plus students. That's another thing to look for. When you go to an interview, avoid men in blue suits with brown shoes and look for the rainbows, because it's a silly little thing, and obviously, you know, lip service and virtue signaling, and we could talk forever, but it honestly, it'll give you a really quick temperature of how things are.
One of the things that sold me on the school that I'm currently working at is I walked in and about a third of the staff were wearing rainbow lanyards. And
Mm-hmm.
it didn't even take very much. I just walked in and went, cool, excellent.
Yep.
And in a Jewish school that I worked at last year, when I went in for my interview, it was Pride Month, and they had their big Pride Month display at the front entrance of the school before you even walked in. And I think that, for me, was so important. And to sort of end our discussion as we come towards the end,
Mm-hmm.
on a nice note, when I left the school last year, the only other queer member of staff who was head of safeguarding, and he pulled me aside and he said, I want you to know what it meant to the students to see you being so visibly Jewish and queer, because it's one thing me being queer, but I'm not Jewish. I'm not like them. They don't see me as the same as them, not yet, anyway.
Yeah.
Especially because it was an SEN setting.
Yeah.
And to see me just being myself in my own form meant that it normalized it for them.
Yeah.
And I cried for like a week about that. And every time I think about it, I cry, like I'm crying now. I just teared up. Ugh.
No, it is so important, because this is why we do what we do, really, at the end of the day. You know, you want to help these kids, and sometimes you need to just be yourself and be there and exist, and sometimes that is enough.
They say that when you grow up, you become the person that you needed to be, the safe person that you needed when you were growing up.
Yeah. I hope so. Yeah. And if we all are allowed the freedom to do that, that would be in everyone's best interest. And especially if you're in a faith setting where things are just naturally going to be a little bit more, I mean, again, with generalizations, and everywhere's different, but I think you're right. I think in faith settings, there's a tendency to have less of that diversity of input and beliefs and outlooks and worldviews and so on, in the institution anyway. Can't speak for kids at home, because I've definitely seen some things elsewhere. But yeah, it is super important. But in terms of, can I be queer here? Like it depends. It depends on the place.
Legally speaking, yes.
Yeah, legally speaking. But is that a battle you want to fight? Because I can tell you, it is some kind of nightmare. So I think the best thing for us, like, to protect ourselves as much as, because I've kind of got this thing where I see some injustice and I want to, get out my flaming sword and go storming in, but I can't do that anymore. So I think we need to be a little kinder to ourselves and be a little more cautious, looking after our own well-being. You can't pour from an empty cup. Put on your own mask before assisting others. And if we put ourselves in these situations that we know are toxic, then at the end of the day, like you may stick it out for a bit, or you may help some kids, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be a sustainable solution, and you're going to come out broken and drained and miserable. So do your research, talk to people who work there, look for the rainbows, avoid the blue suits and brown shoes, and try and really get a feel for a place before you commit to something that ends up bleeding you dry, I think would be my advice. But yeah, it's complicated.
It is. I would like to just add here that if you are really struggling in your school, George White is also known as the trans Catholic teacher, is a trans man and a Catholic teacher of RE at a Catholic school, and has lots of resources on his social media pages that you can go to that can kind of help, and also can give you direction on how to ask those questions. And also, if you are union represented, talk to your union about this, because they don't know it's a problem because people do not talk about it.
Yeah, massively. And even within, the larger unions, sometimes you get individual caseworkers or people on advice line who, for some reason, just still, I guess it's what you said, people aren't talking about it enough. Like they don't necessarily understand, especially if they are not, as that kid said to me, part of the community, then they don't necessarily get it, or they're scared to address an issue head on, but every teacher needs to be in a union. And this is one very clear reason why. But I would also like the unions to get their acts together, because it's not always a perfect support system either. But it's better than nothing. It really, really is. So be in a union.
And two charities that you can look to. So for Muslim LGBT plus individuals, there's I'm so sorry if I butcher the name. It's Hidayah UK, and for the Jewish community, it's Keshet UK, and both have great resources for educators, and also for those people of faith who need to discuss a bit more about what it's like to be both queer and a faith.
And that would be a really great ending note, but I forgot to mention something, so we're going to drag this out some more. So so there was an article in The Guardian by a writer whose name I cannot for the life of me recall, and I should probably look it up really quickly, but my phone's somewhere else. And he was a teacher, he's a writer, and he's a teacher, and he was talking about his experiences coming out in school, and this wasn't too long ago. And this was a recent article, like in the past week or two. And how he worked in a Catholic school, and that kind of added to the complexity of things. Like, and the fact that this has been published now, I feel like people are, starting to speak up a little bit more, and things are starting to be in the forefront of people's minds, and everyone's having to be a little bit more aware of things than they have been. And I think that generally gets better and better. But with our government determined to take us, Graham has posted the link. There we go. The government determined to, take us back to 18, whatever. We do have to kind of actively push back and make sure that we're supporting each other and supporting ourselves and doing what needs to get done. And the writer's name, Michael Donkor. There we go. So I haven't talked on him without saying who he is. So, any final messages, words, thoughts?
I just realised we haven't mentioned Graham of War Tipping was the person I organised this evening with.
Yeah.
And he has very kindly come and joined us this evening on the chat. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, and for also pulling this out of me. It was a pie in the sky idea, and I'm so glad that I got to share a session with you.
Yeah. Graham's wonderful, especially because he's a teacher from the East Midlands, which means he's just naturally a little bit better than everyone else. Didn't win the board games in Nottingham though. Anyway, all right, so it is after 10 p.m. and we're wishing everybody a wonderful evening or day or whenever you end up listening to this. Be your authentic selves and join a union if you haven't already. All right. Thank you very much for listening and have a good night.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.